Good evening. Okay, so if any, I think some of you might be newcomers here. Yeah. Have you done meditation before?
Yes. I started in Argentina, like something not very guided. Some months ago, I started some guided meditations.
Okay. 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 So what we normally do here on Tuesday nights is meditation on the breath. And I've been each week explaining different aspects of the practice. And so we try to incorporate those into the practice that we're doing. And so the first part of the class is meditation together. And before and after the meditation, I talk a little bit and give you a chance to ask questions as well. And then we have a short break, 10, 15-minute break. Then after the break, I give a talk on different topics. And a few weeks ago, I began talking about emotions, how to work with disturbing emotions, which is a big subject in Buddhism, how to work with our mind to transform our mind and try to have less disturbing emotions like anger and more positive emotions like love and compassion. So I'm sort of going through a series of talks on that topic and also meditations as well. So that's what we'll be doing in the second part of the evening. Okay, so for this meditation that we're doing in the beginning, it'll be meditation on the breath. And we'll start with a little bit of calming down, relaxation to try to get our body and mind into a good state for doing meditation. And then we'll just have a period of silence on the breath, being aware of the breath coming in and going out. And I would also like to ask you, so a couple of weeks ago when I began talking about working with emotions, disturbing emotions, I explained a couple of general methods that can be used for any kind of emotion, whether it's anger or anxiety or depression. So some ways we can work with any kind of disturbing emotion that arises. And I thought that I just wanted to suggest that if during the meditation you notice a disturbing emotion like irritation, sometimes we can get irritated with sounds that are happening, or we might feel irritated with some inner experience, like there might be some sensation in our body that we don't like, some feeling of pain or discomfort, or just something that we wish would go away. Or it could be some thought in our mind. We might remember something that happened yesterday or today or sometime in the past. Memory of that might come up and we might find ourselves getting upset about that, getting disturbed about that. So during the meditation, it can happen that disturbing emotions can occur in your mind. And so if this happens, there are a couple of things that you could do. You could try one of them or more than one if you wish. So one is to just remind yourself of the nature of the mind and the nature of the disturbing thoughts and emotions. So there's this analogy that's often used in the Buddhist teachings about the mind being like the sky. If you think of like today, recently we've had totally clear, cloudless skies. Yeah, so when the sky is like that, you just look up there and there's nothing but sky. There's no clouds, birds, airplanes. So sometimes the sky is like that, totally clear. So it is said that the real nature, the true nature of our mind is like that. It's similar to the sky. It's vast, it's spacious, it's clear, it's pure. But then just as in the sky, sometimes things appear. Clouds appear, airplanes go by, birds fly around. But they are not transitory. I mean, sorry, they are not permanent. They are transitory. They come and they go. They're not a permanent part of the sky. And it's similar with our mind. So our mind has this basic, clear, space-like nature. But then because of different causes and conditions, a thought will arise, an emotion will arise, a memory will arise, an image will arise. So all of these thoughts and emotions that occur in our mind are transitory. They're like the clouds that go through the sky. They're not permanent. They come and they go. And also they're not really solid. They're not things that are solid and made of some hard material, but they're just the nature of mind itself, which is a non-physical thing. So if we can understand that, then we realize that these thoughts and emotions can't harm us, can't really bother us, can't really cause any problems. It's only if we don't know how to deal with them, if we don't know how to manage them, then they can become problematic. But if we can learn how to manage them, then it's possible to just observe them come and observe them go and not be bothered by them. So this is one sort of general method or antidote for working with disturbing thoughts and emotions, is to just remind yourself that they are transitory, not permanent. They're like clouds that come and go in the sky. So these thoughts and emotions just come and go in our mind. So you can observe them come and observe them go. And they will go because that is their nature. And also another thing to keep in mind is, it's difficult to do, but try to not have a judgmental attitude towards the thoughts and emotions that come up, instead of saying, I like this and I don't like that. Usually we react with aversion to those thoughts and emotions that we don't like, and we want them to go away, so we have this kind of agitated attitude towards them, and we want to push them away, we want to get rid of them, we don't like them. On the other hand, those thoughts and emotions that we find pleasant, likable, then we have the opposite kind of attitude. We have the attitude of grasping, attachment. I like this, I want it to stay, I don't want it to go away. So both of those attitudes are not realistic, because these thoughts and emotions that come up in our mind are transitory anyway. So they're just things that come and go, and there's no need to get so emotional about them. And even if we try to hang on to or grasp onto the nice ones, we can't, because their nature is that they will pass. They won't be able to stay with us. And if we have the other attitude of aversion and hatred and dislike towards the unpleasant ones, we try to push them away, we actually get into a kind of conflict. The mind gets more agitated, and that can just make things worse rather than better. Whereas if we can just have a neutral attitude, a non-judgmental attitude, just observe them come and go, then they will just pass by themselves. Now you can try this, but sometimes it doesn't work. So it may not work, but it can work sometimes. So it's worth a try. Another thing I mentioned in the last couple of weeks was this idea of de-identifying with the thoughts and the emotions that come up. So by that I mean, normally what happens is we identify. So like if anger comes up, we immediately identify with it. I am angry. Or if anxiety comes up, fear comes up, immediately we feel I am afraid, I am anxious. Or if depression comes up, we feel I am depressed. So we tend to we get our I involved in the emotion. And doing that has the effect of, it's like putting fuel on a fire. It just increases it. It makes it stronger, more powerful, and it'll probably last longer as well. So this is something that just happens automatically. We probably don't even notice that it happens. But if we can try to avoid doing that, it will be very helpful. And one way we can change this habit of identifying and learn to de-identify is to just say to ourselves something like, there is anger in my mind, or there is fear in my mind, or there is depression in my mind. So to just say that to ourselves, by doing that, you're not identifying with the emotion, but you're seeing it as just a phenomena, a mental state that's in your mind, rather than who you are, what you are. And doing that can be very, very helpful. It can sort of give an instant sense of relief or release, or space between yourself and your emotion. And that can be very helpful as well. So if any of these things make sense to you and you can remember them and use them during the meditation, if you notice disturbing thoughts or disturbing emotions coming up, then try to use these techniques to avoid getting all caught up in the disturbing thought or the emotion, and letting your mind get agitated about it. Okay, so let's begin with some relaxation. So when we meditate, it's good to be comfortable and relaxed as much as possible. So you need to find a position that is comfortable for you, where you have as little pain or discomfort as possible, so that you can sit still as much as you can during the meditation. And whether you're sitting on a chair or you're sitting on the floor, try to keep your back straight. That's very important, because the mind is a sort of energy that travels around the body, and the main place where it travels is up and down the middle of the body, parallel to the spine. So if our back is straight, then the movement of the mind through the body will be more conducive, more clear and unobstructed, and that can help us have a better meditation, a more concentrated state of mind. But other than the back being straight, try to relax the rest of the body. Relax your shoulders, your back, your neck. And if you notice there is any tension anywhere in your body, try to let it go, release it. You can imagine that it melts and flows away, drains away out of you. And you can imagine it going down and sinking into the earth and disappearing in the earth. And do the same with any mental tension. So, for example, if there's some problem happening in your life, something you're worried about, working on, concerned about, try to put that aside or let go of that for now, so that it doesn't become a disturbance in your meditation. So you could also imagine that flowing out of you and sinking into the earth. And if you can, imagine yourself being filled up with positive energy. If you're comfortable with the idea, you could imagine positive energy coming into you from the enlightened ones, the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, those who have incredible wisdom and compassion and love, and they're always around observing us and pouring their positive energy into us and trying to help us and guide us. So if it's comfortable for you, you can imagine positive energy coming into from them. Or you can think of some other way of bringing positive energy into yourself that is something you can relate to, something that's comfortable for you. And let your breathing be natural. Let your breath flow in and out in a natural rhythm. So just allow your body to breathe on its own as it normally does, and try not to interfere with or control your breathing. Just let it be. And then with your mind, your awareness, be aware of each breath coming in and going out, but not in a tight, tense way, in a relaxed way, in a light way. So try your best to stay with each full inhalation of the breath and exhalation of the breath. And if your mind wanders away from the breath, which it probably will, so don't be surprised about that or upset about that. But as soon as you notice your mind has wandered away from the breath, try to disengage from the other object. Let it go, put it aside, and then bring your mind back to the breath, paying attention to the breath coming in and going out. And if you want, you can count your breaths, counting each full breath as 1, then count up to 5 or to 10 or more if you wish. So just count in rounds of 5 or 10 breaths. So doing that can help you to stay with the breath, to stay focused on the breath. But it's an optional thing. You don't have to do it. Just do it if it's helpful. And then, as I mentioned before, if some disturbing thoughts or emotions come up in your mind, see if you can deal with them in one of the ways I mentioned. Reminding yourself that they are impermanent. They are like clouds that go through the sky. They come, they go. They're not permanent or solid. Try to avoid judging, reacting with aversion or attachment. And try to have a neutral attitude. Just seeing this as a mental state that's coming and going in your mind. And try to not identify with it, but see it as just a phenomena in your mind rather than who you are, what you are. So try any of those methods that might be helpful for dealing with a disturbing thought or emotion. And then when it has, if it goes and when it goes, you can go back to observing the breath. So let's do this for about 15 minutes. Do any of you have a question you'd like to ask about meditation or? Don't be shy. So, with regard to this idea of working on our mind, which mainly means working on how we deal with disturbing emotions like anger and depression and anxiety and so forth. So Buddhism says that it is possible to transform our mind, and in fact that's the real purpose of meditation and the Buddhist path, we call the spiritual path. The real purpose of doing meditation is to transform our mind, and the meaning of transforming our mind is decreasing disturbing or negative emotions and increasing positive states of mind or positive emotions like love and compassion and so on. So this is stated in Buddhism, and this is as I say, the real purpose of practice, meditation and other kinds of practices in Buddhism. But I think it's important for us to think about certain questions with regard to this and with regard to our own, how we ourselves relate to this whole idea. For example, is this something I want to do? Is this something I really want to work on in my life? And perhaps a more basic question would be, is it even possible? Do I accept that it is possible to transform the mind? Because I think some people might think that it's not possible. They may think that their mind is the way it is. They were born this way. They've been this way all their life, and they will always be this way, and it's not possible to change. For example, some people may feel that way with regard to depression or anger. They may think, well, this is just the way that I am and I can't change it. So that's one question to consider, whether or not we are able to accept that it's possible to change. And then in addition to that, even if we can accept that it's possible to change, we need to consider, do I want to do it? Do I want to change myself? Do I want to change my mind? And I think that's an important question, because sometimes we may feel, yeah, I really want to change myself. But then when it comes down to it, it's so easy to keep falling into the old habits. And it's actually not easy. It's not easy to change. Sometimes it's easier to just keep following the old way of doing things, which is habitual, which we've been doing so many times before, thousands or millions or billions of times before. I think of it sometimes as going down a road, going down a track. And once you do it one time and another time and another time, it just becomes so habitual. It's just so easy, so natural, so spontaneous to just keep going down that same track or that same road. And sometimes we may feel as if there's no choice. There's no choice except to follow this road. This is the only road there is. But in fact, Buddhism, and not just Buddhism, other spiritual traditions, psychology, and so on, tell us there are other roads, there are other ways of doing things, dealing with things, rather than the old way that we've been used to. There are other ways. So I think of it sometimes as like when we encounter some disturbing emotion, or we have some problem or crisis occurring in our life, it's a bit like coming to a crossroads, crossroads where what do they call them here? Roundabout. In some countries, it's like a roundabout. Yeah. They have those here? Roundabouts? Yeah. Okay. And so when you come to that kind of place, roundabout or crossroad or whatever, you have these different roads that you can go down. And so it's actually quite, I think for some people, it's quite a new idea that they actually have choices. There are choices that we can make. So there's the old road that we've been following all along. For example, with anger. Yeah. So our old way of doing things may be whenever anger comes up, we just immediately explode and get angry and act out of anger and so forth. And we may think that's the only way to do things. But there are other ways. There are other roads that we can take. And if you try, like in meditation, what I'm talking about in these Tuesday night classes is other ways of dealing with situations rather than the old way. And if you try them out, then you might discover actually it's more satisfying. It feels better and works better. You know, you feel better and other people around you feel better. And it just, seems a better way of doing things. So if you do try and find that these other roads actually are better, then you want to follow those roads. And then you can develop new habits. I think in neuroscience, they call this brain. Oh, there's a term for it. I can't remember. Anyway, they say the brain is plastic, neuroplasticity. But there's something about neural pathways, building new neural pathways, like instead of just the old way of doing things, new ways of doing things. And the more we do these new ways of doing things, then those will become more habitual, more easy. Okay, so anyway, I thought these are useful questions to consider. Because Buddhism always says we do need to think for ourselves. We do need to not just follow what the Buddha said or what our teachers say or what the books say, but rather check for ourselves if this is true or not, and if it's right for me. It may be true, but maybe it isn't right for oneself. So we have to investigate those things and then act on the basis of having investigated that, and coming to the point where you feel, yeah, it is true and it is right for me. It is what I want to do. Okay, so how about if we take a break now for about 10 minutes, and then after the break, I'll talk more about working with anger, which we started on last week. So if you're new here, then there's coffee, tea, coffee, tea, biscuits, refreshments, water, snacks. Yeah. So for those who were here last week, I started talking about anger and some methods that we can use for working with anger. And I thought, because we didn't have any time to meditate on any of those last week, so I thought we could do one tonight. So one of the methods I mentioned is to do what we call putting yourself in the other person's shoes. So when you're angry at somebody, what often happens is we just get caught in our own thoughts and feelings and emotions and reactions and don't really take the time to think about the other person and what's going on with them and how they think and how they feel and what is their perspective on the situation, where are they coming from. And if we do take the time to do that, to consider that, sometimes that can be really helpful to get out of our own situation, our own thoughts and feelings, and understand the other person. And that can really help sometimes to cool down our anger, because we might realize that, for example, the other person might be going through some difficulties, and that is why they're behaving the way that they are, which we find angersome, irritating, and so on. And we might realize they're actually suffering. They're experiencing suffering, and realizing that, becoming aware of that, can really change our mind. It may not always work, but sometimes it can really make our mind softer and more compassionate, more empathic towards the other person. And instead of wanting to, fight them, hurt them, we may want to reach out and help them instead. So anyway, I thought we could do a meditation on that to see how that might be helpful. So once again, sit in a comfortable position. Try to keep your back straight. And if you're feeling somewhat tired and you think there might be a chance of getting sleepy, falling asleep during the meditation, one way to prevent that is to not close your eyes completely, but leave them open a little bit so there's some light coming in. So that can help you to stay awake. And then take a few minutes to settle down your mind and your body. You can watch the breath coming in and going out for a few minutes, and try to put aside or leave out of your mind any thoughts that are not related to what we're doing here tonight. So like plans that you may have for later tonight or tomorrow or any time in the future, or thoughts about past events, activities. Just try to leave aside the past and the future and just stay in the present moment and present place. Just being aware of your breath coming in and going out. So now bring to mind the person towards whom you have feelings of anger or irritation or dislike. So it could be someone you actually know or you have contact with, and this person has done something or some things that have been hurtful to you or caused you problems or that you simply don't like, don't approve of. Or it could be someone you don't know, for example, some public figure, like a politician, someone in the news. So a person who behaves in ways that you don't like, you don't approve of, and so you feel anger or aversion towards this person. So just choose one person like that and bring that person to mind. And if you can, it might be helpful to have a mental picture of that person. You could imagine them in front of you. And then think about what it is about the person that you don't like, that you don't approve of, that you find annoying or irritating, pushes your anger button. And then take some time to try to understand this person. Even if you don't know them very well, you could just use your imagination, use your ability to guess, to infer, and see if you can understand that maybe there are things happening in this person's life right now that are disturbing them. They might be going through some problems, some difficulties with maybe they're losing their job, or maybe they're sick, or maybe someone close to them, their spouse or child or parent is sick. So they have worries, anxieties because of this, and that's affecting the way they behave, the way they are, causing them to behave in ways that you find irritating. So that's one possibility. The other possibility might be that there were things happening in the early part of this person's life. So a lot of people have very painful childhood experiences, not receiving enough love and care, and sometimes being abused, sometimes exposed to violence, to alcoholism, drug addiction, and so forth. So as a child, this person may have had some very bad experiences that affected them, such that they are the way they are now. So just think about those possibilities and see if either or both of them might be the case. And then another possible reason why the person is behaving the way they are is that their mind is overrun by disturbing emotions, which is the case for most of us in samsara, unenlightened existence. So within our mind, we have different disturbing emotions, such as attachment, greed, selfishness, pride, jealousy, anger, hatred, ignorance, and so forth. So our minds are afflicted by these different disturbing mental states, and sometimes they just come up really strongly and take over our mind, and we just don't really know what we're doing. We just act under the influence of these disturbing emotions, and so it's not that we have complete choice or control over what we do and say and think, but we are like controlled by our disturbing emotions. So think about that and see if you can understand that in relation to this other person. So if either of these situations is the case, either the person is going through some difficulties now in their life, or they had experiences in their childhood which were really difficult and painful, or their mind is just overtaken by disturbing emotions. So in either case, that means that this person's mind is not in a really nice, calm, peaceful state, but is disturbed, is agitated. One of my teachers, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, uses the word torture when describing what happens when our mind gets taken over by disturbing emotions. Like they torture us, they make us suffer. So just think about that. See if you can understand that this person's mind is actually in a state of torment, troubled, confused, disturbed, not peaceful and happy. And also you could consider the kind of karma they're creating. If they are acting in ways that are harmful, wrong, immoral, unethical, then that means they're creating karma to experience even more suffering and problems in the future. So just see if you can contemplate this and understand see what kind of effect it has on your mind and the way you feel towards this person. So that was just to give you some idea of how you could use this method. And if you think it's possibly useful for you, you could try it again on your own and spend as much time as you need and do it in whatever way that would be helpful for you. And it can be quite helpful. It may not always be effective immediately, but if you think in this way a number of times, again and again, then it might be helpful. It's just the other day I was doing this meditation with somebody that did harmful things to me when I was a child, and now this person has passed away. And I was thinking, maybe now this person is, because according to Buddhism, there's reincarnation or rebirth, and so people don't just go out of existence, but they're born again, and where they're born and what they experience is the result of their actions in the past, their karma. So I was thinking, oh, maybe now this person is in a really awful place and suffering. And as soon as I thought that, then I could see my mind change. I could really see it was just a natural occurrence that I felt, no, I don't want this person to suffer. I don't want this person to suffer. And so my mind became kind of soft and compassionate towards this person. And I thought, I don't want them to suffer. I just want them to realize that what they did was wrong and feel sorry for it, and not promise they'll never do that kind of thing again. So anyway, that's just an example of how this contemplation can be helpful. But you might need to do it a number of times, especially, if there's someone who's really harmed you a lot or harmed others. You could also use this with people who do harmful things to other people. And this is related also to this whole idea of forgiveness. There's a book called The Wisdom of Forgiveness. Has anyone seen it or read it? It was written by a man named Victor Chen. And he includes some stories about the Dalai Lama, but also other stories from other sources as well. Stories about forgiveness. Well, he talks about forgiveness in general, but also includes stories about people who were able to forgive. And it's really inspiring to read stories like that. For example, there was this man in Ireland when he was just a boy, I think 10-year-old boy, during one of the riots or demonstrations between the North and South Protestants and Catholics, whatever it was. And so he was in one of those, and a policeman shot a rubber bullet that went into his eye and resulted in him losing his eyesight. So he became blind from the age of 10. But he never really felt angry at the policeman who shot him. And some years later, when he was an adult, he wanted to find this policeman and get in touch with him and talk to him. So eventually they did. They did meet and talk and even became friends. So stories like that are quite inspiring, that a person is able to not hold on to anger and hatred towards someone who may have caused them suffering and problems, but even become friendly towards them, forgive them and be friendly towards them, and so on. And it can be really difficult to generate forgiveness for someone who's harmed us or who's harmed others. But one thing that's really helpful to realize is that even if we feel the other person doesn't deserve forgiveness, but it's a good thing to do for ourselves, because if we don't generate forgiveness, if we are not able to bring up that feeling in our mind, then what happens is we are holding on to anger, we are holding on to hatred, and that is so painful for us. So we are actually keeping ourselves in a situation of suffering. We are making ourselves suffer by not forgiving. Does that make sense? So So even if we don't want to do it for the other person, it's something good to do for ourselves. Like Jack Kornfield, a Buddhist author and teacher, says, it's so painful to hold somebody out of your heart. So even if there's just one person that we close our heart to, and we say, I'm not going to love this person, I'm not going to forgive this person, that's painful. It's painful for us. So realizing that can kind of open your mind to wanting to forgive and then working on forgiveness. Okay, then I'll just talk about a few other things that can be done for anger. There's one Buddhist text, the Madhyamika Avatara by Chandrakirti. It's one of the classic Indian texts, and it's mainly about emptiness, but it also has a little section on the other perfections besides the perfection of wisdom. So in the section about patience, correction of patience, there's a line in there that, for me, it was so helpful. He said something like, does getting angry undo the wrong that was done? Something like that. I'm just paraphrasing it, but the idea is that, some awful thing, some harmful thing, some wrong thing is done, and then afterwards we get angry about it. But logically, using reasoning, by getting angry, are we able to undo or change the wrong that was done? Does that make sense? Right? I mean, it's such a simple thing. But I don't know, for me, it's like, of course, it's so obvious, that getting angry about things isn't going to change what was done, isn't going to undo the wrong that was done. And it's just making ourselves unhappy and agitated and, creating suffering for ourselves. So it's, I don't know, for me, that was a very helpful idea. I mean, of course, then you may say, yes, but anger can lead to positive and constructive behavior, which is true. So we're not saying that, we should just be passive and let harmful things happen and not do anything about it. That's not the Buddhist way. Buddhist way is to try to change situations, try to stop harm, try to protect victims from being harmed and so forth. But to do these kind of things without anger, to do these kind of actions with compassion. So in some ways, anger, there's a lot of energy there, and it's quite natural that we do get angry. But if we can work in such a way that we can tap into that energy and then use that energy in constructive things, then that would be the ideal thing. So I heard a story that there was a meeting of Nobel laureates, people who'd won the Nobel Prize, which includes the Dalai Lama. So there was many of these people together, and the Dalai Lama was giving a talk about anger and how anger is so bad and so wrong and so harmful and so on. And when he finished talking, one of the other Nobel Peace Prize winners got up, and it was a woman, and she said, excuse me, but I disagree with you. And she said that she had won the Nobel Peace Prize for working to eliminate landmines. And so she said, if I hadn't gotten angry about the landmines, the existence of landmines, I wouldn't have done the work that I did. So that shows that, I mean, of course, you don't have to get angry. You could be a bodhisattva and just act out of compassion and not anger. But, we are ordinary people, ordinary human beings. We do get angry about things. But if we could at least use the energy of the anger in constructive actions, constructive work, and not destructive work, then it can be very helpful. So her anger over landmines, motivated her to start this big project and really work to eliminate landmines, to the extent that she was awarded the Nobel Prize for her work. So there's lots of examples like that, of people who use their anger, their rage to do things that are positive and constructive. And okay, then another method for working with anger. This is something that I just sort of invented on my own, based on something that I read in a Buddhist book many, many years ago. So I read this passage that said, if we didn't have faults in ourselves, we wouldn't see faults in other people. So that really was a very powerful statement for me, because I have a very critical mind and I tend to see faults in everybody. So I thought, oh my God, does that mean I have all those faults myself? All those faults I see everywhere else, they're my faults. So I started using this method. Whenever it's more specifically when we find ourselves being critical or judgmental, which is a kind of anger. I mean, that is a kind of anger. We may not be shouting and screaming. It may just be in our mind. Our mind is talking to ourselves and saying, you know, this person is like this and they're bad and da 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 da. So that kind of mind, that kind of mental state of being critical, finding faults, being judgmental, and so forth. So when I find that sort of thing happening in myself, then I use this method. I call it the mirror method. So I try to figure out exactly what it is that I don't like in the other person. And then I look back at myself and ask myself if I have that fault, if that's something in me, or if it's some behavior that I have done before. And whenever I use this method, I always find something similar. It may not be exactly the same as what I see in the other person, but something similar to that. And sometimes it's really shocking. It's like, oh, you mean I'm like that too? I have that in me? But on the other hand, it's very useful because, you know, if we really want to develop ourselves and become better persons and more able to help others, we do need to make some changes. And that means we need to see those aspects of ourselves that are not so good, not so positive, and that need to be worked on. So sometimes, you know, we don't see our own faults. It's very easy to see other people's faults, but we can be kind of blind to ourselves. So this is like a useful method. That's why I call it a mirror method. It's like the other person is sort of a mirror to you, showing you something about yourself that needs to be looked at, needs to be worked on. And then, so it's a sort of step-by-step process. So the first step would be to bring to mind the person that you are judgmental about. Then the next step would be to determine what it is about the person that you don't like. What exactly is the fault there? Then the third step would be to ask yourself if that's something you find in yourself. And sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes you may need to try it a couple of times before you're able to recognize it. And also when I lead this in a group of people, some people say, are you sure I have that fault too? It's like they really doubt that. And I say, well, I don't know. You have to check that for yourself. I can't say. But yeah. So it's just a method. It's just a tool, a technique to use. And it may not be true. It may be not the case that you have that fault in yourself. But my hunch is that there may be something similar to what you see in the other person. And that's why we get so annoyed. That's why we find that particular quality so annoying and irritating. It's because, this is what I think happens is we have things in ourselves that we don't like and that we tend to suppress or bury. I mean, Jung calls this shadow, right? So we have the shadow, those parts of ourselves that we don't accept, we don't like, and so on. So we try to keep those undercover. And then when we see other people showing that same kind of quality or whatever it is, that same kind of behavior, we react in the same way. That's bad. That's wrong. You shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't do that. So that's why we have anger and annoyance and irritation and judgmentalness when we see those things in other people. It's because we don't accept them in ourselves. We don't like them in ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So then, if you are able to see in yourself something that's similar to what you see in the other person, the next step is to accept, is to generate acceptance. Now that can be quite hard because it could be something you've been repressing for years and years, maybe your whole life. So it's not easy to do that, but it's very much worth making the effort to do it. So even if it takes your whole life to get to the point where you can accept that part of yourself, then that's very, very helpful. And when you can accept it in yourself, you'll stop hating it in other people. You'll stop judging other people for it. So, so that's kind of roughly how to do that method. And there's a very nice book from an American woman who's she's a psychologist, but also a Buddhist practitioner and Buddhist teacher, Tara Brach. The book is called Radical Acceptance. So that's all about this idea of accepting yourself, just as you are accepting everything in yourself, even things that you find unacceptable. And it makes sense that if you don't accept those things in yourself, there's always going to be this tension inside, this conflict inside. And then when you see those things in other people, there'll be anger, there'll be criticalness, there'll be maybe even worse, maybe more, maybe getting into violence and war and so forth. So, so acceptance of things in yourself, and acceptance, being accepting of these things in yourself doesn't mean saying, okay, well, that's fine. I can be that way. I can be a cannibal. I'll go and eat people. No, it doesn't mean that. It's just acceptance means, okay, that is there. That is part of me. I have to accept it. I can't deny it, but I can change it. If it is something unhealthy, unskillful, something that will lead to suffering and problems for yourself and others, something that's an obstacle to the spiritual path, an obstacle to enlightenment, then of course it's something to be worked on, something to be transformed, and you can transform it. But the first step towards transforming is acceptance. If you can accept those things, then it's possible to change, to transform. Does that make sense? Another method for working on anger, for those who are able to accept karma, is to think about karma. So in situations where somebody's doing something hurtful or causing problems for us or whatever, this is what a Buddhist would think. A Buddhist would think, well, this wouldn't be happening to me if I had not created the karma to experience it, because the teachings on karma say that whatever we experience, whatever happens to us, is the result of our own karma from the past. We acted in certain ways in the past, and as a result of that, we find ourselves having some kind of experience in the present. So that answers the question of why me? Why me? Why is this happening to me? It's not happening to other people. It's not fair. So, so the Buddhist explanation is karma. And so sometimes it's not even necessary to go into past lives. I mean, the teachings usually talk about past lives. Okay, in past lives we did this and that, and that's why we have the experiences we have in this life. But sometimes you don't even have to go to past lives. Sometimes you can just think of this lifetime and things that you may have done in this lifetime that could have brought about this difficult situation or painful situation that you find yourself in now. Yeah. So anyway, it's something you can explore. You can explore this idea of karma and check: have I done something? Is it possible that there is a reason from my side that is responsible for me being in this situation? But I think we have to be careful with this idea of karma, because I don't think that it means we should then blame ourselves. You know, sometimes with anger has this wish to point the finger at somebody and blame them. You are the one at fault. It's your fault, you know, and we want to target, like a target, you know, for our anger. Somebody we can shoot. So if we're not careful, then thinking in terms of karma might cause us to point the finger at ourselves and then shoot ourselves, hate ourselves. And I'm sure that isn't the point. That isn't what the Buddha intended when he talked about karma. Because, I mean, for one thing, I don't think it's appropriate to blame anybody. Because even if we consider our own karma, okay, I did do harmful things and that's why this is happening to me. But where do those harmful things come from? Why did I behave in those harmful ways? Is it because I'm bad? Is it because I'm inherently, you know, a bad person? No, Buddhism doesn't say that. Buddhism says that our mind is basically, as I was saying during the meditation, afflicted by disturbing thoughts and emotions like ignorance. We don't see the true nature of things. And as a result of ignorance, we also have anger and greed and these other kinds of disturbing emotions. And so this situation is really due to mistaken states of mind that see things in mistaken ways. Cognitive errors, we could say. We are making cognitive errors. And that's where all our problems come from. And it's not really our fault. We didn't choose to be this way. We didn't make ourselves this way. And nobody else made us this way. I mean, Buddhism says it's just the way things have been from beginningless time. We've just never wakened up. We never woke up. We never managed to wake up and see the truth of things. And so that's why we're still in this situation. So if we think about that, think about how so many different causes and conditions that brought about this situation of ourselves being ignorant and acting in ways that are unwise and unskillful, creating karma, and then experiencing the result of our karma, it isn't appropriate to then point the finger at ourselves and blame ourselves and hate ourselves and think, I am bad. You see what I'm saying? So that's not the point of thinking in terms of karma. It's just to avoid pointing our finger at the other person and putting all the blame on that person. So for me, this is another thing that I find really, really helpful in dealing with anger or other disturbing emotions, is thinking in terms of what's called dependent origination in Buddhism, which basically just means that whatever exists and whatever happens is the result of so many, many different factors, so many different causes and conditions from different places and different people and from the past and going back and back. So you really look into situations, you can just see this happened because of that, and that happened because of that, and that happened because of that, and so forth. So it's just a huge number of factors and causes and conditions. And if you contemplate this, the effect for me anyway is that I don't find anywhere to point my finger and blame. You know, there isn't just one thing or one person or one object that I can blame for what's happening. It's just vast. Yeah, just a huge number of factors and causes and conditions, and it's really nobody's fault. It's not one single person's fault. So that really helps to cool down the anger. I mean, that's my experience. You can try it yourself, but I find that very helpful. Dalai Lama talks about that as well, as a way of working with anger, is to contemplate how everything is dependent on other things. And also dependent arising, dependent origination is one of the best ways to help us get an understanding of emptiness, the true nature of things. And they say that's the real antidote. Understanding emptiness, meditating on emptiness, understanding emptiness, especially with regard to the self. You know, there isn't a real permanent I, me, myself here who is suffering or who creates bad karma or whatever. And also with the person that we are angry at. There's no real solid person or you or he or whatever it is there that I can blame for my problems. So contemplating dependent origination, contemplating emptiness really kind of cools down the mind, really helps to sort of pull the rug out from under the anger. Anger has nothing to stand on anymore. Does that make sense? Or any questions about that? Yeah.
I have a question about so how to differentiate between the energy that can be really powerful, which is maybe not anger, but is quite close to being anger. And because I've been working at about the same time when I became a Buddhist, I started working with mentally handicapped who were sometimes violent, sometimes self-damaging. I also worked in psychiatric wards, and so sometimes you have to go in there and be very forceful. And so I found more or less that sometimes if somebody has just hit me and I had to stop them from hitting me or others, I would be more likely to go in there with a kind of feeling of, now I want to get even.
Now what?
Now I want to get even.
Yeah.
Just hit me.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were discussing that about, somehow I came up with this, you go in there and be forceful and have this very urgent sense, but if there's not the sense of wanting to get even or wanting to harm, then it wouldn't be anger, I thought. How do you like that idea? How would you differentiate between having this very powerful energy and which can be good, and then anger, which is damaging?
Well, I think you just have to know your own mind, your own experience, and know if what you're feeling is anger or if it's real, genuine concern for the other person and the damage that they might cause to others and so on. I think it can be quite hard to deal in that kind of situation, with people who are behaving violently, especially if you yourself were hurt by them. I think it'd be quite hard, even if you think intellectually, I really don't want to hurt this person, but because of our predispositions, to being angry and also protecting ourselves and so on. We've done that so many times before, not only this life, also past lives, that it's very hard not to have anger coming up. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I was thinking one of my teachers, some time ago, I think a student asked about mercy killing, with animals. We have this practice in the West that if an animal is injured or old or sick or dying, to put it out of its misery, to kill it, in other words. And so this question often comes up in the context of Buddhism, is it okay to do that? Is it right to do that? And so he made an interesting comment that really stayed in my mind. He said, even if your feeling of is compassion, you really love this animal, you don't want it to suffer, you want it to stop suffering, but the act itself of killing it, however you do it, whether it's a shot or whatever, drowning, different ways people use that. The act of killing itself is such a violent thing that it could bring up the feeling of anger in you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what I understood. So I think it's quite hard when we are in a situation like that where we may have to act in somewhat violent ways, even if it's for the good of the other person. I think it could trigger off the feeling of anger. You know what I'm saying? So I think you just have to be aware of that, and even if it does come up, I think it's not something to beat yourself up for, because we do have all these seeds of anger in our mind, and it's very hard not to have anger coming up. But maybe afterwards you could just try to meditate on that and work on that, and try to prepare yourself for the next time if you ever find yourself in that situation again, how you could do it in a way that's more genuinely compassionate and not angry. You know what I'm saying? Does it make sense what I'm saying? I don't know if it's answering your question.
No, I would definitely be more efficient with stopping the violent act if it was coming towards me than I would if it was going towards somebody else.
You would be more efficient?
Yeah, in stopping the violent act, you trying to hit me, I'm definitely going to stop it as soon as I could. And
yeah.
So that it was hard leaving
the I.
Leaving the I.
Well, it's not surprising. You see, we've had this strong sense of I in our mind for so long, so many lifetimes. So it's not easy to not have that sense of I and that sense of wanting to protect ourselves. So I think it really takes a realization of emptiness, and really seeing emptiness to be able to be free of that. In the meantime, we just try to manage it and try to not let it be too destructive. Well, I don't know. Is that helpful? Or is there still some...
Yeah, I'm not working that way.
You're not doing that work anymore? Yeah, I would imagine it must be very challenging. Yeah.
It's about the sense of self. You mentioned that something about seeing that the person that you are angry towards, something about not seeing a self there, something like that. And then I thought about when I'm angry, I really feel a sense of self, and sometimes if I manage to direct my attention to it, it can be very helpful, and I can sometimes it can dissolve because I discover that I cannot find the self that I'm looking for, and that's very good. But I wonder, is it possible also to practice some of the same thing with other people? But I cannot really figure it out, because I would think it would be not very nice to like have the idea about another person that you are not in some way. I think that I ought to see another person as a person, as a self.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just talking about this idea in a very brief way, but it's actually a big teaching in Buddhism, the whole idea of selflessness or emptiness. And yeah, normally one has to study a lot and meditate a lot in order to get an understanding of it. But yeah, according to the Buddhist teachings, all beings, ourself as well as everybody else, are empty of a real solid, something that we can point to and say that there is the self. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. Does So saying that beings are selfless doesn't mean they don't exist at all. It means that they just don't exist in the way we normally see them. You know, like there's a real person. There's something within that. Because what we are, according to Buddhism, is we're just a mass of physical and mental components. You know, we have all these atoms and molecules and, you know, physical things. And then the mind is made up of all these different thoughts and experiences coming and going all the time. So we're just this mass or collection of all these physical and mental components coming and going. And within that whole collection, there isn't a thing that you can point to and say, that's the self. You know, like a fixed, discrete entity. That's the self there, you know. There's just this mass of changing things coming and going. Whereas we normally feel there is a real self there. There is a real enemy that we can't stand, or a real wonderful person that we're attached to, and a real I who's over here, you know, having these thoughts and emotions. So this is our usual sense of things. But they say, well, Buddhism says it's not like that. You know, we don't have a real self, but others also don't have a real self. And realizing this is really, really helpful. In fact, it's essential if we really want to stop having our disturbing emotions of anger and attachment and so forth, because they are all based on seeing people in this mistaken way. But realizing emptiness, realizing selflessness, it's not like wiping out people. It's not like negating them or erasing them. It's not like that. We just see them as they really are. And then one of my teachers said this statement that I found so beautiful. He said, when we can see other people and beings as they really are, we will feel nothing but love and compassion for them. And so it's definitely not about negating people, but valuing them, respecting them, loving them, caring for them, wanting to help them. When you see them as they really are, that's how you will feel. And you stop having anger and hatred towards them. So that's the result of understanding this idea. But it is a difficult thing to understand, so I don't have time now to go into it all, but it's a whole subject in itself. So we're going to have to stop here. Is there one last short, quick question? Yeah.
Difference between getting angry with a person and a topic or an idea, because you said it could be constructive to get angry with some harmful things, and then.
No, what I meant was if anger comes up, for example, there's injustice or somebody's harming somebody, and it's quite natural to get angry in that situation. And so what I meant by being constructive, I meant using that energy of anger. There's a lot of energy there, using it in a constructive way rather than a destructive way, like putting that energy into actions that will stop the injustice, change the injustice, stop the harm. Like the woman who worked to eliminate landmines. So she used her anger energy in a constructive way. So that's what I was talking about.
Yeah. But that's different from getting angry with a person. It cannot be used in a constructive way.
Getting angry at a person. Well, it could be. It could be. Yeah, if you're angry at a person who's acting in a harmful way, then, I mean, if we just let ourselves get angry, then anger might lead us to do destructive things. We might hurt the person, just think. So instead of that, if we can think, now what will really be helpful for this person? Not beating him up. Beating him up isn't going to help, but maybe there's other things that I can do to help this person to change and do things differently. So I'm just talking in a very general way, but I'm trying to make the point that try to use situations where we're angry in non-harmful, non-destructive ways. And if possible, it may not always be possible, but there might be possibilities of doing things that are constructive, that are helpful, rather than destructive. So, yeah. Okay, so let's stop here for tonight and just take a few moments to make a mental dedication of what we have done here tonight, the positive energy we have created. So we spent this time doing meditation and then listening to and thinking about these teachings on how to work on our mind, in particular, how to work on anger, how to transform our mind so that instead of being angry and hateful and critical and destructive, we can try to be more patient, loving, and constructive. So spending our time in this way is something positive. So we have created some positive energy. And now we can share this positive energy with others. We can do this mentally, wishing that this positive energy will bring more peace, happiness, and decrease the suffering of other people and other beings everywhere in the world. And may it help all living beings get closer to enlightenment. Okay, thank you. Good night.
And thank you very much for teachings tonight. And if this is the first time you are here, or more than first time, I remind you on Thursday there are teachings on Buddhist philosophy.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and the center is all run by volunteers, volunteer work. And, also anything from rent to electricity, whatever is paid by donations. So you're also very welcome to leave either from one, there is a suggested donation of 60 crowns, but you're very welcome to give whatever you can or wish, from 1 crown to 17,000.